The Pageant of the Sioux, taking possession, in the King's name, of all the countries commonly included under the designation Outaouac, by Claude Dablon. Read by Frank Blissett. It is not our present purpose to describe this ceremony in detail, but merely to touch on matters relating to Christianity and the welfare of our missions, which are going to be more flourishing than ever after what occurred to their advantage on this occasion. When Monsieur Talon, our intendant, returned from Portugal, and after his shipwreck, he was commanded by the king to return to this country, and at the same time received His Majesty's orders to exert himself strenuously for the establishment of Christianity here, by aiding our missions, and to cause the name and the sovereignty of our invincible monarch to be acknowledged by even the least known and the most remote nations. These commands, reinforced by the designs of the minister, who is ever equally alert to extend God's glory and to promote that of his king in every land, were obeyed as speedily as possible. Monsieur Talon had no sooner landed than he considered means for ensuring the success of these plans, choosing to that end Sieur de Saint-Lusson, whom he commissioned to take possession, in his place and in His Majesty's name, of the territories lying between the east and the west, from Montreal as far as the South Sea, covering the utmost extent and range possible. For this purpose, after wintering on the lake of the Hurons, Monsieur de Saint-Lusson repaired to Ste Marie de Sioux early in May of this year, 1671. First he summoned the surrounding tribes living within a radius of 100 leagues, and even more, and they responded through their ambassadors to the number of 14 nations. After making all necessary preparations for the successful issue of the whole undertaking to the honor of France, he began, on June 14th of the same year, with the most solemn ceremony ever observed in these regions. For, when all had assembled in a great public council, and a height had been chosen well adapted to his purpose, overlooking, as it did, the village of the people of the Sioux, he caused the cross to be planted there, and then the king's standard to be raised, with all the pomp that he could devise. The cross was publicly blessed, with all the ceremonies of the Church, by the superior of these missions. And then, when it had been raised from the ground for the purpose of planting it, the vexilla was sung. Many Frenchmen there present at the time joined in this hymn, to the wonder and delight of the assembled savages, while the whole company was filled with a common joy at sight of this glorious standard of Jesus Christ, which seemed to have been raised so high only to rule over the hearts of all these poor peoples. Then the French escutcheon, fixed to a cedar pole, was also erected above the cross, while the exaudiat was sung, and prayer for His Majesty's sacred person was offered in that faraway corner of the world. After this, Monsieur de Saint-Lusson, observing all the forms customary on such occasions, took possession of those regions, while the air resounded with repeated shouts of "Long live the King!" and with the discharge of musketry, to the delight and astonishment of all those peoples, who had never seen anything of the kind. After this confused uproar of voices and muskets had ceased, perfect silence was imposed upon the whole assemblage, and Father Claude Dablon began to eulogize the king, in order to make all those nations understand what sort of man he was, whose standard they beheld, and to whose sovereignty they were that day submitting. Being well versed in their tongue and in their ways, he was so successful in adapting himself to their comprehension as to give them such an opinion of our incomparable monarch's greatness that they have no words with which to express their thoughts upon the subject. "Here is an excellent matter brought to your attention, my brothers," said he to them. "A great and important matter, which is the cause of this council. Cast your eyes upon the cross raised so high above your heads. There it was that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, making himself man for the love of men, was pleased to be fastened and to die, in atonement to his eternal Father for our sins. He is the master of our lives, of heaven, of earth, and of hell. Of him I have always spoken to you, and his name and word I have borne into all these countries. But look likewise at the other post, to which are affixed the armorial bearings of the great captain of France, whom we call king. He lives beyond the sea. He is the captain of the greatest captains, and has not his equal in the world. All the captains you have ever seen, or of whom you have ever heard, are mere children compared with him. He is like a great tree, and they only like little plants that we tread underfoot in walking. You know about Onontio, that famous captain of Quebec. You know and feel that he is the terror of the Iroquois, and that his very name makes them tremble, now that he has laid waste their country and set fire to their villages. Beyond the sea there are 10,000 Onontios like him, who are only the soldiers of that great captain, our great king, of whom I am speaking. When he says, 'I am going to war,' all obey him. And those 10,000 captains raise companies of 100 soldiers each, both on sea and on land. Some embark in ships, 100 or 200 in number, like those that you have seen at Quebec. Your canoes hold only 4 or 5 men, or at the very most 10 or 12. Our ships in France hold 400 or 500, and even as many as 1,000. Other men make war by land, but in such vast numbers that, if drawn up in a double file, they would extend farther than from here to Mississauquank, although the distance exceeds 20 leagues. When he attacks, he is more terrible than the thunder. The earth trembles, the air and the sea are set on fire by the discharge of his cannon. While he has been seen amid his squadrons, all covered with the blood of his foes, of whom he has slain so many with his sword that he does not count their scalps, but the rivers of blood which he sets flowing. So many prisoners of war does he lead away that he makes no account of them, letting them go about whither they will, to show that he does not fear them. No one now dares make war upon him, all nations beyond the sea having most submissively sued for peace. From all parts of the world people go to listen to his words and to admire him, and he alone decides all the affairs of the world. What shall I say of his wealth? You count yourselves rich when you have 10 or 12 sacks of corn, some hatchets, glass beads, kettles, or other things of that sort. He has towns of his own, more in number than you have people in all of these countries 500 leagues around, while in each town there are warehouses containing enough hatchets to cut down all your forests, kettles to cook all your moose, and glass beads to fill all your cabins. His house is longer than from here to the head of the Sioux, that is, more than half a league, and higher than the tallest of your trees, and it contains more families than the largest of your villages can hold. The father added much more of this sort, which was received with wonder by those people, who were all astonished to hear that there was any man on earth so great, rich, and powerful. Following this speech, M. de Saint-Lusson took the word, and stated to them in martial and eloquent language the reasons for which he had summoned them, and especially that he was sent to take possession of that region, receive them under the protection of the great king, whose panegyric they had just heard, and to form thenceforth but one land of their territories and ours. The whole ceremony was closed with a fine bonfire, which was lighted toward evening, and around which the Te Deum was sung to thank God, on behalf of those poor peoples, that they were now the subjects of so great and powerful a monarch. That was the Pageant of the Sioux, taking possession, in the king's name, of all the countries commonly included under the designation Outaouac, by Claude Dablon. Read by Frank Blissett.